around, and I love this guy's last name. Jerry Delaney joins us, and he's written a book called Bannock, A Growing Up Story in the Vigilante West. And I was thinking of Jerry this weekend, not just because he has a great last name and he has a great book, but I got a Stetson because as soon as everything lifts, I'm on my way to Santa Fe, and the Stetson will work perfectly. It'll be perfect for walking around the plaza there, just a beautiful place, and that's where Jerry is. So Jerry, obviously you have a fascination with the West, right?
Well, I grew up in Montana.
And we have a lot of listeners in Montana. What was it like growing up in Montana?
Oh, what was it like? Oh, boy. Well, I actually lived there from 7 to 17 and went to grade school and high school there, and then I left at the end of my 16th year. My father took a job on the war crimes trials in Tokyo, and so we moved from Montana to Tokyo. So what I can compare is growing up in Montana with living in Tokyo when I was 17 and beyond. And it was a huge change in life. I mean, it was a whole pivot and changing one's life. But Montana was beautiful. Montana was beautiful. We lived on the foot of Flathead Lake with the Mission Mountains to 5 miles to the east of us, and the lake in front of us, and the rolling hills to the west. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous town.
So we have to go back to you're in this gorgeous place, Flathead Lake, the rolling hills. You're looking at all of that, and then you all of a sudden get catapulted to Tokyo, and your father has a big job with the war crimes trials. So for you, all of a sudden, again, being in Tokyo, and especially something with the war crimes trials, what did he say about that time period?
Well, it was a real inflection time for the United States because we had just emerged from the war with a real deep sense of triumph. And the Nuremberg Trials took place and the Tokyo Trials took place. And my father specifically was on the prosecution staff there in Tokyo. And trying to establish international laws that would prevent future wars. Well, we know what happened to that. So that was a big disappointment. But at the time, it was a joyous time because it was part of our sense of exceptionalism came out of that time.
Yeah,
which I don't care for, but that did.
Yeah. What an interesting front row seat for you. And let's talk about your book. So we go back to your roots in the West, Montana. Tell us about Bannock.
Well, Bannock was a mining community, and that opened in 1960 when they discovered gold on Grasshopper Creek, and it immediately became very fruitful and became very produced a lot of gold and produced a lot of influx from people from the east and south. So you had my main character, a young man named Billy Mayfair at 16 years old, comes up to Montana from Illinois, where his home was, and works in the mining camp in Montana. It's a great adventure story of him hitchhiking by Canastota wagon from Illinois to St. Louis and working in a Union hospital during the Civil War in St. Louis, and then getting a steamer up north 2,000 miles to the mining camp in what would soon be Montana territory. So it's an adventure story.
And what's so impressive about your book is that I feel like we're right there. You plant us right there. And I have to tell you, it was really sad thinking of the Civil War in St. Louis and what that was like. And I think people don't realize how bloody and how sad and how families were torn apart by the Civil War. Do you think the same thing?
Oh, yes, it was. And it was a real seminal period in American history, of course. And it gave birth to the vigilantes, for one thing. And that's what turned me on to the book, because I had grown up in Montana, as you know, and had been taught in school that the vigilantes were great heroes in the West. And I discovered that wasn't true, and that's what led me to start writing the book.
Yeah. So tell us about you told us about Billy Mayfair. Tell us more about, it's an adventure story. Tell us more about the book. I mean, obviously you take us a couple of different places.
Well, it's a book that basically does two things. It's a growing up story, an adventure story, in which Billy Mayfair is basically kicked out of his home by his father, and hitchhikes to St. Louis, and works in St. Louis, as I said, at a Civil War hospital, and then takes the steamer north to Montana and works in the hard drinking and hard fighting town of Bannock, which grew up overnight. And he becomes a witness to the vigilantes establishing of rounding up 20 people and hanging them in a month's time there. And he gets to know not only the vigilantes, but he gets to know the people who got hung or hanged. And so you see, it's both an adventure story and it's also an expose of the history of that time, how history got it wrong. The official history got it wrong. So the book is also an explanation about how history can lie to us.
Yeah, in our minds, we have a different view of what a vigilante is, don't we?
We do. The vigilantes, incidentally, were all Masons. They were very righteous people who were very ambitious and saw an opportunity to turn that territory into a political unit. And so with their righteousness, they hanged all these people who were mostly roughnecks, hanging in saloons and things like that. Not somebody you'd want to have for dinner, but they also didn't kill people, and they were charged with killing people.
Yeah. The impressions that I think that we're left with vigilantes is so different than what you've actually talked about in your book, and you're talking about how history got it wrong. What do you hope people take away from reading your novel?
Well, first of all, a lot of fun in reading it because it's an adventure story, but also a sense of history of that time. Western history can be very interesting if it's done right. And so you have a sense of not only of Western history, but how Western history has shaped our history, our contemporary history. The past is prologue. The things that happened then are also the things that are happening now. So you have both the pleasure of a story and also the icing on the cake is learning something about American and Western history and how that has influenced our history, our contemporary society.
Yeah, I agree with that. You can see that, and you can see that in reading your story. So what's next? This was so well done. I have to assume you have another book on the brain, do you?
No, I'm afraid I don't. But I'm getting a little too old to go back and tell stories like that. But that's received a lot of very nice compliments over. And so I'll stand on that.
I like that. I like how you said that. I'll stand on that. Bannock, a growing up story in the vigilante West. It's terrific. You can escape in it. You'll have fun. I think Jerry said that as well, and that's one of the things I took away from it. So you can pick it up on Amazon and wherever great books are sold. Jerry, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
And I'm going to put my Stetson on, and I'm going to look for you when I go to Santa Fe.
I hope so, yes.